And now to Decision 2024. With President Biden no longer running for re-election, the presidential campaign looks far different today. Biden is still in isolation with COVID, but Vice President Kamala Harris is out campaigning. Donald Trump's vice presidential nominee, Vance, held his first solo campaign event as well. Political reporter Marianne Ahern here now with what the buzz is surrounding Harris today. Marianne?
Good afternoon, Marianne. Harris is having a very big campaign finance moment and has already secured half of the delegates needed to win the nomination. Since the Biden announcement, there are pledges of up to $81 million from Democratic donors, and that is a one-day record. This afternoon, Harris is in Delaware for a campaign event, meeting with the Biden campaign staff, who now will be working for her. These are the ones who led and have been leading this campaign. They have been told they will keep their jobs. The campaign headquarters is in Biden's home state and will stay there as they pivot to the Harris question mark ticket. They have less than 105 days until the election, so there is certainly pressure. But before Harris even arrived in Delaware, she spoke of President Biden earlier today from the White House lawn.
Our President Joe Biden fights for the American people, and we are deeply, deeply grateful for his service to our nation.
As for the Republican ticket, J.D. Vance held his first solo campaign event in Ohio. As he was introduced, an Ohio state senator said, quote, "If we lose this election, it's going to take a civil war to save the country." Vance's event was in Middletown, Ohio. That's his hometown. Big crowd showed up for his homecoming. Vance's speech focused on Donald Trump, vouching for Trump's leadership, as well as Vance highlighting how their ticket will fight for common sense in schools. Vance also wasted no time in criticizing what he says is an insult to voters as Democrats change who is at the top of their ticket.
If you want to run for president, you've got to make your case to voters. You make your case to voters. That's what President Trump did, even though he would have already been the president. And even though he was by far the most popular person in the Republican Party, he ran for the Republican presidential nomination. He faced some good competition, and he made his case to voters. The idea of selecting the Democrat Party's nominee because George Soros and Barack Obama and a couple of elite Democrats got in a smoke-filled room and decided to throw Joe Biden overboard, that is not how it works.
Well, this is day one on the new campaign. Perhaps you've heard of what's called an October surprise, when something shakes up a campaign in October. Well, we've got one already, a couple of them in July. There is no way to predict what we'll see in the weeks ahead. One final note, Kamala Harris is expected in Milwaukee tomorrow afternoon. Wisconsin is going to get lots of attention. We will be there if she is there to get a gauge of the reaction that she receives. Stefan?
We'll probably get an October surprise as well, man. I'm just thinking.
October, September, you got it.
Yeah.
Every day.
Month.
Every day.
Marianne, you've got a busy job. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. The president's decision to step off the campaign trail now prompting some Republicans to look into possibly removing President Biden from office before his term ends.
Charlie Wojciechowski joins us now with that part of our continuing coverage. Charlie.
Well, Marianne, Stefan, the Republican argument goes something like this. If the president is unable to run his campaign, how can he run the country? At least one congressman from South Carolina, her name is Nancy Mace, is even talking about removing him from office using the 25th Amendment.
This is certainly an interesting year.
And political science professor Constance Mixon says there is a lot to make sense of now that President Biden is out of the race and has endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris. House Speaker Mike Johnson is calling for the president to resign his office.
He has the nuclear codes. He has major decisions that he has to make every single hour of every day, and he does not have the faculties to do so now.
Others are talking about invoking the 25th Amendment to the Constitution, which under Section 4 allows for the vice president to assume the powers and duties of the president should he be unable to do so, an idea rejected today by Illinois' senior Senator Dick Durbin.
I think those suggestions are outrageous. I work with this man. I know him. The debate performance does not reflect who he is or his capacity to govern as President of the United States.
It is not the first time in recent years that there has been a suggestion to invoke the 25th Amendment. In the wake of the insurrection on January 6th, the call came from then Illinois Congressman Adam Kinzinger on Twitter.
It's time to invoke the 25th Amendment and to end this nightmare.
You are not going to get Vice President Harris and a majority of the cabinet to vote to remove Biden as president. If the 25th Amendment wasn't invoked after the January 6th insurrection, I highly doubt it'll be invoked now.
There are also threats on the part of some Republican Party officials to file lawsuits to disrupt a Harris candidacy.
I think you'll see litigation. I don't think there'll be successful litigation. Similar to the Trump litigation after the last election, there were 60 lawsuits filed and none were successful.
So why would it be important to disrupt a Harris nomination? Well, Bert Odelson says because her name is already on the ticket as vice president, she has access to the Biden war chest, and according to the Federal Election Commission, that could be over $230 million.
That's a lot. Thanks so much, Charlie.
Now, ultimately, it is up to party delegates to decide who the next Democratic nominee will be at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago that happens next month. But as Vice President Kamala Harris prepares to run for that top spot on the ticket, there are questions now about who could possibly be her running mate. And so far, she's not said anything publicly, but who she's considering, though there are reports that she made calls to at least 2 governors over the weekend. Several names have been floated around as potential vice presidential candidates, and as our Kate Chappell reports, 2 of them are from our area.
Several recognizable names from the Midwest have surfaced as potential vice presidential running mates alongside Kamala Harris should she become the Democratic nominee, including Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker and Transportation Secretary and former South Bend Mayor Pete Buttigieg.
Illinois is a pure Democratic state, so you've got Illinois in the win column.
Pritzker and Buttigieg each endorsed Harris on Monday, but neither has made a public media appearance since Biden left the campaign. Nor did they respond to our request for comment on if they'd accept a VP nomination.
I think if somebody calls you on that, what you do is at least listen.
Also on a list of potential nominees, governors from several key swing states, a factor often considered by candidates according to legal experts.
Geography, the electoral map, where they could use some help in terms of the Electoral College, but also demographics.
Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear, Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper, and Arizona Senator Mark Kelly have all endorsed Harris and are all considered potential VP picks, bringing political crossover appeal to the ticket.
I think it's really important that we do keep the focus on her this week. The vice presidential conversation needs to occur later.
California Governor Gavin Newsom, who debated Ron DeSantis on behalf of the Biden-Harris campaign in November, has also been named as a potential running mate. Legal experts, however, say the 12th Amendment, which mandates the president and vice president hail from different states, would pose a problem for a Harris-Newsom ticket.
All the California electors wouldn't be able to vote for both of them in the Electoral College. And that's a lot of electoral votes. California has the most electoral votes. So that's definitely a disadvantage.
Notably, Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer,
today I am fired up to endorse Kamala Harris,
who endorsed Harris on Monday, said she won't take a VP nomination and plans to stay in Michigan. Kate Chappell, NBC5 News.
Thank you, Kate.
People who attended the 1968 Democratic National Convention in Chicago can't help but draw parallels to what we're seeing happening right before our eyes this summer. Now with the DNC just a month away, both conventions held in Chicago during wars, with incumbent presidents causing some political shakeups, and questions still to come about who the nominee will be.
With George McGovern, we wouldn't have a National Guard.
Tensions were high in 1968. In the middle of the Vietnam War, Democrats gathered in Chicago to select a presidential nominee.
I was an aide, and I drove around a journalist who worked for another TV station, and I had to walk under bayonets on Michigan Avenue when the National Guard was called out.
Election attorney Bert Odelson remembers the violence breaking out among anti-war protesters, leading to chaos inside on the convention floor. That's where Donna Berlinger-Mercier was working as an usherette, assigned to stand in front of the main podium and keep order among the delegates.
It was just like now, there's just so much uncertainty of who was going to run.
Incumbent President Lyndon B. Johnson had decided not to run again. Then ultimately, who became the candidate? His vice president, Hubert Humphrey. 56 years later, President Biden is standing down and endorsing his vice president, Kamala Harris.
The cause for the Democrats now is to win the election. and beat Donald Trump.
R. Craig Sauter teaches at DePaul University and has written books about political conventions. He was also in Chicago during 1968, but he points to some major differences. Democrats may not have an open convention this year if they hold a virtual roll call and successfully nominate Harris.
There'll be a little scuffling around, but they'll unify around Harris. She's been a good vice president.
Ultimately, those who were here in 1968 are hoping for the best.
I think they need to take a page out of the book by having, good security, but maybe not as much violence as at the 68 convention.
So how did things turn out in 1968? Well, in November, Democrat Hubert Humphrey was narrowly defeated by Republican Richard Nixon.